Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. We're doing an episode today of the In-Depth series. Normally, what we do here is we're charting the history and the growth of the entrepreneur. There's dozens have been recorded. You can see those at sellersessions.com. Now, today's going to be slightly different. By the time this goes out, we'll be past the 22nd of December, and you'll probably be into the mode of coming off the back of a big Q4, which most of you will. So I thought I'd save it to post Q4 for this because I think it's a very important conversation. Some of you may have seen the news stories around Paul Barron and his brand and what happened there with Amazon. And it took many different turns. And August of last year, Paul got to a point where he didn't think there was any way back. So I'm going to talk to Paul today. We're going to be discussing a lot around mental health, and we're also going to discuss the way back and where he is today. And hopefully some of you guys can learn from this, because often what happens when men check out is that no one knows until it comes. There's not very many telltale signs. So just want to make sure that everyone in the community's head's right going into the new year, and hopefully this is something that everyone can learn from. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, man. I know that
it is good to be here. Literally, it's good to be here.
It is. I know that you and I chatted a little bit about this. I think it was almost, I don't know, a little prior to most of that shit hitting the fan. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word.
Yeah, of course.
Prior to that, Timmy had his, he kind of talked a little bit at Seller Sessions and, Southern Seller Fest. And you and I had a sidebar conversation about mental health. And then, about a year later, this story comes out, and I felt like I had dealt with all my issues, and then like the demons come out of the closet.
Yeah. And I suppose what happens is it's, they're almost like milestones when they come. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there are points where things stack on top of each other, and then it kind of drops. I mean, if you look the difference between CPTSD and PTSD, the difference really is they're micro traumas that then build up when it's CPTSD, which is more the complex end. I'm not saying that's what you had, but it's when these kind of things start to build, they kind of creep up on people. They get pushed and shoved to the back, and then there's a grand event, and it can go many different ways, but thankfully you see a way through. We'll get into that part as well. Having someone like Tim Jordan around, having a chat as well to help you get there. But let's back up. I want to walk a timeline. Let's start with unpacking, for those who don't know, the situation with your brand, Amazon. Then it started hitting the news cycles and stuff as well to a certain degree, right? So Can you take it from the top from there?
Okay. Yeah. So my wife and I founded the brand in 2015, and it was the year after my son was born. So there was kind of some mental health stuff that I had dealt with. It's interesting. Mental health is one of those things that oftentimes you don't realize that you deal with issues until somebody external to you says, "Hey, or maybe something's not right." But at least for me, it was my wife was like, "Hey, she had identified, this is about 5 years into marriage, that like you seasonally, like every year in like the winter, you kind of get really down." And so she kind of, I guess, sort of diagnosed me with seasonal affective disorder. And there was, prior to starting our company on Amazon, I had lost my job like 2 years or like a year and a half prior. So there was a big kind of like a big blow to my ego. And at this point in my life, I was going through a lot of hard stuff. And like, I feel like you and I had this conversation, like the core of who I am is I want to help people, right? Like going into entrepreneurship, it's a means to an end, not just like for money, right? I think that entrepreneurship is different for everybody, right?
Mm,
For me, it was like I wanted to do this because I wanted to fund like missions work, being able to go and like do things in third world countries and things. Because my background was actually in like the church. It was very um, religious growing up. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a pastor and I wanted to just help people. So fast forward to my early 20s, I got married and needed a job. And I started making six-figure income and more money than I ever expected to make in my life. And I was just not happy. I felt like I was just not accomplishing my life's calling. Like the company that I was working at, I just felt like I had to lie to people. I was a salesperson,
mm,
and I didn't like that. I didn't like feeling that I was lying to people, even inadvertently,
mm,
and got fired from that job. Go into this kind of depressive phase where my wife kind of gave me this ultimatum, like either we go through couples therapy or we're gonna split. And that's one of those things that like in marriage, like we do not talk about divorce. Like we just don't. Like that's not an option because we made a vow. Like I made a commitment in, and I know that life brings you ups and downs, and like you can't just throw in the towel when you're feeling low. And that in that
I know,
regard,
but there's also the fact because of your, you know, in there's that element of religious beliefs
right?
as well. So it
Exactly,
depends on that. But
exactly,
the one, you know, I've had issues with my marriage. We've done 2 rounds of marriage therapy, but like 10 years ago, you know.
mm,
But we've been together 31 years. So
right,
people grow, you grow, they grow, and then you can grow apart, and then you work these things out, and you work through all your different kind of attachment styles, and it can get quite deep. But I suppose for you, it's like you don't discuss divorce because on a religious basis, right?
right.
If we're talking about you're a Catholic, right?
No, I'm not. I'm just normal Christian. I
Okay,
guess
so you're
evangelical,
Christian,
I guess.
but that plays a big role. But there's also the health of the marriage and the
Right.
communication and intimacy on all levels. You know, they all play a role as well. And so, what you have to avoid is being in an unhappy relationship because that also reflects on the kids, right? Because
100%.
children don't listen to what you say, they observe and go by your behaviors. So, the
Right.
way that you show love to your wife and vice versa, they may grow up to see that that's love, and that might not be the greatest picture. We all try our best as parents, right? And so I think it's more outside of religion is the health of the marriage is really important for everyone, right? Because that
Mm,
would bleed into mental health, the mental health of your children, how your children look up to you. But I can understand why it's difficult because you've got the pressure of your community saying, okay, till death us still part no matter what. Yeah.
right.
So that then you've got the public shame or public scrutiny.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head because I think that I have examples of people that have just stayed married and grit their teeth and bear it, but they're
Mm,
the most unhappy people. And I think that,
absolutely.
going into any commitment like that I view as, should be lifelong. You're excited when you go into it. So what is it at
Mm,
some point you lost your excitement? So what's going on? And I think that these markers of like, okay, I don't want to get therapy. I don't want to. I think it's just you and I were talking before we started recording, and I'll get to this portion of the story where I had a conversation with Tim, but I really think that men in particular, we we view ourselves as we have to be the strong ones. We have to be strong. We have to be strong. We have to be strong. And sometimes that means that okay, well, I don't need to get help. I'm strong. I don't need help, right?
mm.
And it's also a little bit of embarrassment admitting that you need help and
Yeah.
admitting. So
It's
this
pride.
was, yeah, pride. You're like, okay, I'm weak, right? Like there's
Well, yeah. you're right. There's that element to it as well. But a lot of guys have never gone through the stage of understanding how to process. So it'll
Right.
come out in a number of ways.
Right.
Could come out in anger. It can come out some. Not that I agree with it. Some people could come out as violent or silent.
Yep.
They go into their mental man cave and they kind of try and deal with it their own way. But it resonates and has an effect on everyone around them. But
Yep.
it's right. No, you don't want to no one wants to admit, how many of the ladies in our industry would sit there and go, yeah, I'd like to admit I'm weak. They won't. They're
Right.
bosses. Do you
Nobody
see
does
what I
that.
mean? They,
Right.
they grit their teeth and they get on with it. And but ultimately, it's got to come out somewhere, right?
Yep. So this was about 10 years ago before my son was born. So 2014, my wife was like, you're either going to get therapy or I'm going to raise this kid alone. And you're not healthy. We need to start doing some work. So I remember the very first therapy session that we ever went to, and it was just, I didn't want to be there. And it was just like the height of depression. When you're in depression, if for the people that are listening to this or watching this that don't deal with mental health, don't deal with depression specifically, it's hard to explain. But the people that do, you get it. And you're down and you don't know why you're down. And you start to perceive the world in a very negative aspect, very negative.
Mm.
Like everything is negative. All like people are frowning that could normally be frowning, and then you think, well, what did I do? It's my fault. Why are you frowning at me? Why are you upset at me? What did I do? You start to internalize things and take things personally that you shouldn't. And so let's fast forward. So I got myself kind of mentally healthy there, and I guess what I'm going to kind of weave through this story is that I feel like the importance of mental health is just like physical health. You can't just run a little bit once and be like, okay, I'm healthy. And then 5 years later, you're a couch potato. You can't look back at that one period in your life when you were an athlete and say, I'm an athlete, I'm healthy, because you once did those things, right? If you currently are in a state where you are not mentally healthy and you need to continually evaluate yourself and not think, okay, well, I did that thing once, I'm good,
Mm.
right? That's I guess what I'm thinking through is that there's these periods where I was in couples therapy, and then that led me into seeing a individual counselor, which was fantastic. But I think that, or at least for me, I don't know if other people are like this, but for me, I'll tend to like go into coast mode. Like, I'm good. I want to coast. I want to relax. That's hard work. I don't want to do that work anymore. So we started, let's fast forward to when we started the business 2015. Um, I was working for myself. I was doing a marketing agency, and I was also working waiting tables at night. Right. So I was working my ass off. And within our first month, I think we had something like $9,000 or $6,000 in sales, something like that. And when you go from really making hardly anything to your top line revenue is like 9 grand, like that's a ton of money,
Mm.
right? And we rounded out the year with 50 grand in sales, and the next year we did like a 250,000. And all along this journey, like we kept getting all these like press hits. Like, I'm just good at getting press. Like, that's one of those knacks that I have. Like, I guess, like, I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. I love connecting human experience, right? I love figuring out, okay, what's something about this brand that resonates and how can I bring that to market? And that's a strength that I have. Like, another strength that I have is like, I love going to networking events and meeting people, and not just like connecting like them with me, but more so like connecting people to people, right? And like, that's what brand storytelling is. You're connecting people with people, right? So um, we were kind of like riding high on this crazy wave. Like, we were on the Rachel Ray show in 2016. That was a year after we started our business. Then in 2017 we had a partnership with an Olympian, and it just kept going up. And 2018 like was our probably 2019 was one of our best years ever. And then we started making some bad decisions, I think 2019, where we were biting off more than we can chew. We took out loans that we were expecting on having the biggest 2020 ever. So we had a bunch of loans that we had taken out. And I think that a part of this too is that starting in 2018, I started going on the speaking circuit, coming back to I believe my calling in life, like helping people, right? Like I started speaking because I wanted to teach people how we were doing what we were doing, how to help people. Like I wanted to show people, hey, we got this press for our brand. You could do it like this. Then I started this course on chat bots and chat marketing and stuff, and I started teaching people how to do that. Like 2019, 2020, I started talking about like influencer marketing and stuff. But when 2020 hit, like that just crushed our business. You know, there's a lot of people that in the pandemic, their businesses just went insane because people were at home buying stuff. Our business relies on travel market. Nobody was traveling, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was locked down at home, and our sales just went through the floor. Then in coming out of that in 2021, we had, you know, the same thing. Everybody's paying these exorbitant rates for containers. We paid something like 20 some odd $1,000 for a container, right? When normally it's like 1,200, 1,500, 2,000. And that was huge. Then right after, so then this happens, that container gets delayed. We have this terrible review that somebody writes about our swim diapers, that it arrived dirty. And it was like 2 days in a row, we had the exact same thing happen. And it was on our top 2 selling SKUs. So, you know, it could be random chance. It could be I think whatever it is, what it is. One person emailed us and we said, hey, we're so sorry. Like this was not us. You know, let us know. We'll send you a new one. They didn't write a review, but this other person wrote a review, and they left it on Amazon. And we tried contacting Amazon. Oh man, I can't even tell you how many hours, just hundreds of hours contacting Amazon. I even had at one point in time the representative on the phone like say, yeah, this is our fault. It's a fulfillment issue. So I've got all this mounting pressure, right? I've got this public persona, Paul, that's starting to build 2018, right? I've got this persona of Paul's a smart guy. He's teaching people how to do these things. Not only that, but I was being really ballsy and saying, hey guys, look at my brand. This is proof I know what I'm talking about. Go search on Amazon and you can see we're a bestseller, right? Check it out. And then this stuff starts happening. And then I spoke at Prosper in 2021. And a few days after that, our number one selling SKU, this was not covered in Bloomberg, right? The way that Bloomberg covered it was like this review was the reason that our business started tanking. It was one of the reasons. But it's funny because what you read in the news and what actually happens, there's like, yeah, okay, that was true, but then there's more truth. There's stuff behind the scenes, right? Somebody had
Well, they
basically,
build a narrative, right? So the editor puts out what they want for clicks and eyeballs.
right? They
So it
wanted to
can be
tell
the truth, but sometimes it's distorted, and
it's a version
sometimes
of
it's
the
not.
truth,
It's a version of the truth. Like, never let the truth get in front of a story is what some
right?
people may say, especially if they're chasing eyeballs and page impressions.
Right. And so the deeper story was this happened with the review coinciding with somebody like nasty black hat attack, like our number one selling SKU was delisted for 10 months. You couldn't find it. And this was the one that, I had tied a lot of my, I guess, inadvertently my self-worth to, looking
Mm.
back, right? Because I'm going and I'm speaking and I'm telling people, hey, if you do these things, check this out. And the other thing that really kind of I started taking personally was I go and I do these events and I speak at, this was like literally worldwide. I mean, you and I had this conversation in Australia. We also spoke on the same stage in Estonia, like
Mm.
earlier that year, right?
Well, that was
And
the year I did the world tour. That was 22, but we
oh,
were
that
on
was
the road a
22.
few times. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
23.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was doing all this stuff and I have been doing all this stuff specifically to help people. And I started taking it like really personally, like people are attacking my brand
Mm.
and I'm building competition and I start getting this shit kicked out of me by people that are like literally like the way that I see it is like you are stealing the food from my kids' mouths. Right. And I'm on stage and I'm teaching you how to do something.
And that's because you don't have a scarcity mindset. Unfortunately, not everyone is the same. The way that you're projecting, right, is good in
Right,
terms of, there's enough around for everyone, but not everyone's going to see it that way.
right,
It's either you or me, and that's end of it. There's no sharing. There's no, it depends on the person's mentality, their upbringing, their proclivity to narcissism, self-serving, whatever. But that's something where you're on stage
hmm,
and you're going to get that thing and go, who does he think he is with his bestseller? And I'll teach him
right,
a lesson. And that's some of the things where it provokes and triggers people to do and act with those behaviors of something of which you can't control, right?
right.
And unfortunately, that is the real world, and you've got to experience it. And it's things like this that wake you up. Like your eyes are open to that, right? After all this stuff has happened to you, you are going to look at life through a different lens.
And this is one of the reasons why I've significantly cut back my speaking.
Mm,
I'm selective in now how I share my knowledge, which is, I guess, good and bad. It's sad. It's good and it's sad.
mm,
Um, One of the reasons is too, because I mean, I have a 10 and a 7-year old, right?
mm,
And, while all this stuff is going on, I have this like massive issue, right? Starting in
mm,
2019, 2020, where we are getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. And I'm just ignoring it. I'm like living, okay, well, I've got to be the Paul that people see. I've got to
mm.
be the guy that people believe me to be, which is separating from my core identity, right? Like I don't want to put
Well,
on a
yeah, I
face.
mean, basically, you're not coming back to the self. You're projecting, let's say, not intentionally, a false self. So
Right,
that there's that Paul, and then there's Paul.
right,
So, and you're not bipolar by any stretch. So there's two Pauls, and you're
right.
feeding. It's like that's the ego, Paul, and I
Hmm.
mean that in a respectful way. You have to have a
Yep,
healthy ego, or you have no self-esteem regulation, right?
right.
So there is a difference between healthy and non-healthy,
Yep.
but that was the one that you projected, and that's the one that you were trying to keep rolling whilst the
Hmm.
real Paul in the background was having a struggle. Is that a fair
Yep.
assessment?
Oh, 100%. And the thing is that my good friends would know, like, hey, this is hard, this is hard. And but then I felt like I had to put on a face and be the guy,
Mm,
right? I had to be the guy that people wanted me to be because
mm,
they were, having me come and speak at their event. I needed to be that guy, right? And the challenge with that is you are who you are at the end of the day when your head hits the pillow at home with no one around you. That's who you are, right?
mm,
And if you're not okay with that person, if there's things going on when you're not okay with that person, then you got to figure that person out before you can be the person in front of people. Like,
yeah.
and this I met Spencer, the guy who wrote the article, who's an awesome dude. I love that guy. He's a reporter with Bloomberg at Prosper. I think it was last year. So I've been doing a ton of stuff with TikTok since like 2020, and with TikTok, with like the impending TikTok ban that's been taken forever. He wanted to know like if I had an opinion on that or how like people were viewing this, and I said, well, I don't really think it's a big deal, but I got a better story for you. And that's when I pitched him the story of this, the shitty review. And we worked on that story for probably 3 or 4 months, right? Then it hits basically right on Prime Day. And then I think it became super real for me then because I thought we were like $200,000 in debt, but I was living with my head in this. It was closer to 600 that we're in debt. And then I just start thinking like, there's no way out. There's no way out. And then not only am I thinking like fully confronted with how much, how behind the eight ball we are, I'm fully confronted with. It was like a little bit of a release, like, okay, finally the story is getting told, finally people know. But then at the same time, like everybody started reaching out and being like, are you okay? And I couldn't hide from it, right? So like going and traveling and doing these speaking engagements was a little bit of hiding,
Mm.
because then I could put on the mask and pretend like things were okay,
Mm.
right? Like everything's right, everything's good. And while I'm also struggling deeply internally, thinking like, I'm a, like, why am I here? Why am I on stage? Like, the whole reason why I'm talking about this is taken away because of what happened with this black hat attack. And I've, like, people call it imposter syndrome, whatever. And I was just like, I feel like a fraud. Like,
Mm.
I'm teaching people how to do this, build businesses. And mine is like, we're about to declare bankruptcy. Like, we're not making any money. We've literally like, it was terrible. So that I was super stressed out, wasn't sleeping well. So let's just go into like how things go downhill as
Mm.
mental health, right? Let's say you're dealing with a mental health issue. If you're not sleeping, that's like, sleep is so important, right? I hadn't slept very well for like 2 weeks, like maybe 2 hours a night, and I was just trying to grind through it. And you know when there's that going on, but then also like just feeling like I'm just totally worthless, like I'm not excited about what I'm doing, because we started an agency back in 2020 because of all the speaking engagements. Like, people kept asking me if they could hire me, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I'm going to say this as kindly as I can to the people that are listening. Like, most people in the Amazon space want something for nothing. They want a quick win. They don't want to win. They want to invest as little as they possibly can, and they want immediate results. And I'm not saying that that is true of everybody, but the work that we would do and the work that I do with brand building isn't something you can do overnight, right? Telling a brand story and building a great brand doesn't happen immediately. It's a years long investment. And so I was feeling just super demoralized, because I would tell people these things during like sales calls, and then they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, it's going to take a while." And then like a month in, they'd be like, "Where's my ROI?" Like, we had talked. This is like a year long thing, right? Influencer marketing isn't something that you see now. Anyway, I'm getting too much in the details. So with everything that hit the head, I'm feeling like demoralized, because I feel like I'm not delivering for clients, even though like we were crushing it for people. I'm feeling demoralized because like the reality of the situation, like we have a bajillion dollars in debt that I can't figure out how to work our way out of, because literally every amount of money that we would make on Amazon, everything that we make goes back to paying debt and back to buying new inventory. Like, we can't afford, like, we have a profitable business on paper, like doing good numbers. But when you have so
But
much
it's the
debt,
cash flow and the debt.
yeah,
You
with the
can
cash
you
flow,
couldn't stay ahead of the curve with it. Yeah.
no, it's just suffocating. And when all this started going downhill or happening, like my wife is just she's able to compartmentalize really well. Like, I couldn't do that. Like, it was all bleeding through, and I was in a majorly depressive state.
Mm.
This was like start of July. The entire month of July, I was just probably should have been hospitalized, clinically depressed. Just was not I was not thinking okay. And I had an event that I was supposed to speak at in the end of July, and it was Isabella Ritt's event. And I called her and I was like, Bella, I cannot speak. I'm sorry. Like, I can't go. I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm a wreck. Like, and I said, you read the story. Like, everybody fucking read the story. It was really bad. Um, I'm thinking back and just thinking how grateful I am for where I
Mm.
am now, right? Because that period, I think there were really two very dark periods in my life. The one right before I found out that my wife was pregnant, in that finding out that she was pregnant was like the kick in the ass that I needed
Hmm.
to see to my mental health. I wasn't doing okay. Um, and then this period in July of this year was terrible. And it was because I had ignored all of the pain, all of the um, crap that I needed to deal with because I didn't know what to do, right? I didn't know what to do. I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing everything that I can. I'm doing absolutely everything that I can. The only thing that I could do is travel more, and I don't want to do that. Because if I travel more, then I'm going to be away from my family more, and then I want to be with them, because it's easier to travel when they're little because they're
Well,
small.
on you, but not when your wife's got two little ones running around.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so I just keep having this number in my head, and I'm like, if I just if I was dead, my wife would get an insurance payout. She'd be able to pay off the bills, and I don't even want to wake up in the morning anyway,
Hmm.
right?
No.
And like I said, with people that don't deal with depression, you don't understand.
I'm going to tell you a little secret. Anyone who's telling you they don't have shit going on in their lives are lying, and they're running away from it. They're lying. Everyone has to go through something sometimes. How you
I
deal with it
I
is different.
I agree. I think
Yeah, it's
that
just what you're doing it is you're doing it in a public forum, going back to who you are, sharing, to say it's
right,
okay. Like right now we've got the most available mental health access ever, yet 75% of self-deletion are men. And the difference between you and a lot of those guys is that you didn't take the plunge, and that we, our good friend, stepped in and among others helped you turn the corner to say you're worth it, you're
yeah,
valuable, right? Because men have to be useful and they have to feel useful. As weird as it's going to sound, because people go, no, 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 you love you for who you are. It's not true. Your mum loves you unconditionally, right? That's not romantic love. That's a mother's love. And as men, we have to feel useful. And it goes back to your point, is you have to have a purpose. You notice that when you do things that work really well, when you're enjoying it, it's because it was purpose driven.
yeah,
All right. That's like you didn't want to do the sales job. You wanted to be a pastor because you truly wanted to help people.
yeah,
Right. And then there'll be bits of entrepreneurship you're not cut out for, which is the cutthroat stuff, which we all have to find out the hard way if you're one of those people that take, and I used to be the same, take people on face value. Now I watch behaviors, right? And so you've had a kind of a situation where it's unfortunately it wakes you up to the real world. So you get both views. There's the Paul that sees the bright side of everything, but he also sees that the world isn't always like that, and you have to protect your energy and who you're around in terms of your environment. Yeah.
right, yep.
So
I I think I don't know. I have a term for people that just leech. They're just idea
they're
vampires.
called parasites,
They're
ponces and
parasites.
parasites. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
I'd say it openly. It's like I don't have
Ex-
ponces and parasites around me.
yeah.
I don't deal with it.
I
Go on.
I made a lot of people money with my brain. I haven't made
Mm.
myself as much money with my
Yeah.
brain.
Because
You
that's where the
know,
predators come out. They spot people for low hanging fruit. They take
right,
the piss out of them and take liberties. And it's not until you develop boundaries and stop it all. And do you know what they also say after you've developed boundaries and you put a stop to it? I don't understand what your problem is. The problem is they're no longer getting away with the bullshit they once got away with. So then
right,
they get offended because they can no longer get what they were used to because you said no.
right.
And you're saying no more now, right?
Yeah. So let's go back to July.
Hmm.
I had it was probably the lowest that I've ever been, and I had an it was actually in August, the worst timing for this. My wife's birthday, August 6th. I'm just so mentally low. I don't have energy to do anything, right? Don't even, wasn't fully contemplating, offing myself, but I was thinking, the thought just kept going through my brain. Like, if I wasn't here, everyone would be happier because I'm just miserable. I'm miserable to be around. And my wife would have a bunch of money. She could pay off
Mm.
the debt. She wouldn't have to worry about me. Like, we'd be good. They'd be good. She doesn't want me around anyway.
Yeah. What happened
And
there? Let's look at what happened there.
so
You know
we
about
just,
feeling useful.
yeah.
You felt useless, right? So you
Oh,
lost your
yeah.
self-worth in that. That's why I say it's important. You have a purpose and you
Yep.
need to feel like you're useful to you, to others, to your community. And there was a time there where no matter how often you tried to hit the bullseye, you kept missing. And it
Right.
chips away and it chips away and it chips away. And that's, you know,
It's exhausting.
yeah.
And it's exhausting because you feel like Atlas, trying to
Mm.
carry the world on his shoulders, or you're trying to push a ball up a hill and then you get it and then it rolls back down and then you just keep pushing and you're just exhausted.
Mm.
And on her birthday, we just had a big argument and it was terrible. It was just um, almost like we almost split up.
Mm.
Like, the kids were crying. I was being an asshole. And I was like, you don't even want me around here anyway. And I think that was the real come to Jesus moment that I needed. And seeing them crying, my kids, and just how much of a jerk I was at this point. Um, Fast forward, like, I started thinking, okay, something's not right here. I've got to figure something out. And I started, yeah, that broke me. And I
Mm.
was just like, okay, I need to figure something out. A few weeks later, I think I just I actually was like, okay, starting to get better sleep. I'm going to start working out again and figure this shit out, and we'll just move on. Have a conversation with Tim, and he was like, hey, what's going on? I heard, well, Tim, like, he had heard, I'm assuming that he had heard through the grapevine from one of our
Mm.
friends that I wasn't doing okay. And I mean, he knew too, because I just wasn't replying to his messages and stuff. And had a long conversation with him, and basically it came down to, I was telling him, like, oh yeah, I'm doing so much better now. Like, I'm actually excited about waking up in the morning and getting work done. He's like, okay, well, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm working hard and I'm excited about life. He's like, yeah, okay, well, what are you doing differently though? And I was like, well, I'm working hard and I'm excited about life. I gave it to God. And he's like, Paul, that you're not doing anything differently. Like, from what you've told me, like, you still have your hand in the middle of a fire, but you burned away all your nerve endings and you can't feel it anymore.
Mm.
And you're going to repeat this cycle again if you don't start looking after your mental health. And I was like, at first he was like really starting to piss me off, as good friends should. Honestly, I sometimes feel like your good friends should be the ones that stab you in the front. Like,
No, what they should do is they don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to know at the
exactly.
risk of the relationship. Otherwise, they're just enablers.
And that's exactly what he did. He said, I've got Rochelle's number. And if you don't make an appointment with a therapist and a psychiatrist
Hmm.
in 2 weeks, I will call mental health on you. I will call Rochelle. I will call mental health on you, and you're going to be committed to an inpatient program.
Good.
Because what you've told
Good.
me, because, and that kind of, I wouldn't say, I mean, I was on the right path, but that scared me straight to a degree, because I
Yeah.
was like, okay, for me, when I make a commitment, I keep it, right? That's one thing, like, a fear that I have is, like, I'm not going to be able to keep my word.
Your word as a man is your bond, right? So
Right.
if you haven't got your word, what the fuck do you have? So that's
Right.
why it's important, you know?
So I made a commitment to him. I said, okay, fine, I'm going to do it. So this was, I think, 3 months ago. Well, let's see, it was September. It was September. Um, yeah, so it was in September. So a month after kind of the big, huge argument with my wife. Um, Made an appointment, and long story short, like I am, I thinking through again, like starting with my journey, looking through my entire life. I think that you, as a person, that let's say that everybody's brains are different, first and foremost, right? And we tend to look at the world and rationalize how people behave based on how our brains work,
Well,
right?
they're projections, yeah. So we
Right. So
project onto the world, and we expect everyone to behave the way that we would behave.
exactly, because that's all we know,
Mm,
right? That's all we know. Our experience is the only thing that we know.
mm,
So when we perceive something one way, we assume that everybody perceives it that way, right?
mm.
So I didn't know this, but apparently I've had anxiety basically my entire life. And the reason why I didn't think about that, I never understood what anxiety was or anything, but apparently, like, I don't know, one of the intake questions that the doctor asked was like, "Do you ever have racing thoughts?" And I was like, "Do I ever not have racing thoughts?" Would be a better question, because a lot of like unhealthy behavior for me would start because my brain just wouldn't shut off. Like my mind just would race and just always racing. And I couldn't, and I would be up till 3 in the morning because my fucking brain just wouldn't shut up. And it was just racing thoughts all the time. And um going into winter, he diagnosed me with ADHD, anxiety, and seasonal affective disorder, which I kind of had a finger on seasonal affective disorder. So there were ways that I was managing that. But in a nutshell, I guess what I want people to take away from this is, one, it's okay to say that your brain might be a little broken, because we live in a broken world.
Mm.
And it's not your fault, right? If your brain isn't working okay, it's okay to say that you need help.
Yeah.
Like, the biggest things that I would say is, like, if you don't have a support group of friends, like, find one. Like,
Mm.
I don't, like, for me, like, thankfully I have good family and good friends that some of them were like, some of the advice was a little bit hard because hadn't gone through this stuff, like putting on more weight, like, oh, we need you here, like, don't. And then with Tim was like, anybody knows Tim's story, like, Tim's been
Yeah.
through more than most people ever have.
2 lifetimes, yeah.
It's an insane amount of trauma that he's
Mm.
been through. And the fact that that guy can keep going is an inspiration. And it's the way that I'm looking at it too, is like, also not that he's just going and he's putting on a mask. It's that he's actually taking care of himself, and he's doing all that he can do. And like, when I sort of had this sort of like mental breakdown in August 6th, I started like re-evaluating my life, and I was looking at, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I going on all of these trips? Why am I speaking everywhere? And you alluded to it earlier, is like, I was feeding this ego version, this
It was
this version.
validation, right?
It was validation. Like, I was feeding this. I needed external validation, and I was feeding this ego version of Paul that I wanted to be
Mm.
this guy. And
Mm.
ultimately, what really matters, Danny, is what those three people,
Absolutely.
right?
See, there's a saying that I'd have, is like, when you're rolling and you're on doing well, you have a banquet table, everyone's
Right.
feasting. When you've been up and down, when you go down, that banquet table turns into a coffee table. They're your ones. They're your ride or dies.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's distinguishing between the two of those is very important. And if you've been around the cycle a few times, like I have, you can recognize that, but you don't necessarily recognize it on your first rodeo because it's all new to you. You think they're all your friends, da, 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 da. Then the phone stopped ringing after 3 weeks. Out of sight, out of mind. Do you see what I mean? But then you're
Yep.
still there to pick up the pieces, and the ones who have to live with that are your family.
Right. And that's what matters. That's the reason why I started doing what I'm doing is for my family.
Mm,
And I started thinking through this, like, why did I start this entrepreneurship journey? It was for my family. It was
mm,
for my family, and so that we could enable ourselves to, or so that we could help, like, so that we could do this and help other people. And I'm not
mm.
doing that. Maybe I am kind of helping people. So that's cool, like with the speaking and whatnot, because I have had a lot of good conversations with people that have thanked me for doing what I do. And that's incredibly validating. But ultimately, if I am not, if I am ignoring my family, and if I am trying to put on this face, this public persona of I am this guy, and then I'm going to pass it off with, well, people change, and I've evolved, and then I leave my wife for some different person or whatever, and then it's just a lie,
Yeah.
right? And it's then I bought into the lie of the public persona, and
Unfortunately, people do that, and then they find out the hard way. The grandiosity sets in. Like I always say that we're in the Amazon community, all right? We're tadpoles in a pond. Not Drake, not Rihanna, not any superstars. No
no,
one cares. You walk down the street, no one's going to know you. You're not Michael Jackson. You're
no,
not Mariah Carey. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah,
It
exactly.
just it ends up being an inflated bubble, and then the danger is buying into your own hype. You
Yeah,
know, and I
that's the
think that
thing. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. And like, I think that, like, ultimately what matters to me in life is what God thinks of me and what my family, and like leaving a legacy for my my family.
hmm,
And at the core of who I am is the what God believes of me is not defined by what I do. Like, that's who at the core of who I am. So this
hmm,
idea of having to strive and be perfect, I can rest. I can lay
hmm,
that down. I don't need to be that guy,
hmm,
right? I can lay that burden down because I don't need to be that guy. That guy that has to be perfect. That's what these guys want. That's what the parasites want.
hmm,
They want to use me for my brain and my brilliance so that I can make them a bunch of money. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because what matters is my family, and like getting mentally healthy and coming to terms with, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, the worst that can happen is, honestly, the worst that would happen is, let's say if I die, that would be the worst. Let's say, okay, now let's what's the worst that can happen with the business? Well, we lose everything. We lose the house. Ultimately, that would suck, but it wouldn't be too bad, because there's a lot of people that have gone through bankruptcy and started over, right? And in fact, it might actually be a good thing, because then we wouldn't have the pressure of having to pay $12,000 in debt every month, right? So what's the worst that can happen? If I had to go through these exercises of being okay with that happening, being okay with, like, okay, maybe we have to declare bankruptcy. And when this was when we started being okay with that, when I started being okay with, okay, I don't need to perform. I don't need to be a dancing bear. I don't need to put on a fake face so that people can invite me places and fly me first class to wherever. Like, that's stupid. That doesn't matter. What matters is my family. Then things started unlocking. Like, I started, because again, like, my work history, whatever, my career, um, beside being a brand owner with the agency stuff, we've been partnering brands with creators, influencers for years. And I decided, okay, I'm going to give this a shot as a creator myself starting in May, and like made nothing between May and the first part of August. Then in August, we made like $750 as an affiliate commission. And I started this as an experiment because I wanted to figure out, okay, can I do this myself? And when I started getting mentally healthy, like, my creativity started flowing again.
hmm,
And long story short, in like 6 months, we made like 40 grand in affiliate commission. Like, that's pretty decent money.
hmm.
And ultimately, again, coming back to it, what matters is my family. Maybe that money will still be there. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm enjoying working with the clients that we have. We're making enough to like make ends meet. We're going to figure out, okay, maybe we'll declare bankruptcy on the business. I don't know. right? But I'm
So
okay with
where are you now? If we were to elongate back into the situation with Amazon and
that.
what happened after, once the news came out and post August,
Yeah.
once you had a reevaluation of your life and stuff, what
Well,
happened with the business there?
it's still running. That this time of year is always the slowest for us anyway.
Right.
So really what's the win for us is that I've started making a ton of money as a creator doing TikTok shop content.
Hmm.
And instead of partnering with creators, like we still are with brands, but one of the value adds that I have with my clients as an agency is that we're really good at in-house content. But like I don't even need the agency. Like this is
Hmm.
fantastic. Like I'm so excited. Honestly, Danny, I'm so happy. Like I could just be a full-time content creator and make a ton of money doing that. And
So let's go
I'm
back
not
to the point. Purpose, helping
purpose.
people,
Purpose is
y-
helping people. And
and your
really
purpose is doing stuff that you want to do. You're
that
not
I want to do it
compromising.
right, that I'm not compromising. I don't have to feel like I have to market some garbage product to somebody that is junk because I need their money. And I
Hmm.
can do it with my family on my schedule, on their
Yeah.
schedule, right? Because that's what matters. So where we are now is like financially, like we're okay. Um, we made a ton of money in November and we're doing really well in December. And here's the thing, like money is not the end all be all,
No.
right?
Money's a
Maybe
tool.
money is a tool. I think that the business is doing well. It always does. It always slows down in November, December, but because of all of the like the side projects and whatnot that we're doing, like we're making enough to um, pay debt and provide for more inventory orders when we need them in January. So we'll talk again in like 6 months, and I'll let you know how it's going. I don't want to declare bankruptcy. Maybe we will, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter,
Hmm.
right? Because
You're here.
I'm here. Like it doesn't matter. Like I have a lot of value to add. Like I could go get a job, right? Like the skill set that I have built in the Amazon industry, like there's nobody I could almost I feel it's almost safe to say that there probably isn't anybody in the city that I live in that is as good at marketing as I am.
Hmm. But in
And
order to be really good at what you do, you need to be in that frame,
mentally
right?
healthy.
So,
You need to be okay. Like I need to be mentally
hmm.
healthy, right? And I think that that's the thing is that like when you're not doing okay mentally, you second guess yourself. You feel like, "Ugh." and and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that you're really good at what you do if you are.
No, I mean,
But
that
it's
obviously
false
people
humility
don't.
otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, if you've worked at your craft for a very long time and you've have shown a history of results over a long period, then pretty much that's something that you're good at, right? If you
Right.
can create a repeatable results over the long term.
Yeah.
Consistency's the hardest thing. It's one thing to get somewhere, and then there's one thing to sustain it week
Yes.
after week, month after month, year after year, and then evolve yourself whilst maintaining the consistency with reducing putting a foot wrong. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the hardest part. And going back to that, you would need to be healthy mentally and in your body as well. So
Absolutely. Sorry.
you were talking about earlier on, like some of the things you put together in terms of exercise,
Hmm.
eating, therapy, all of those things are feeding back in to
Yeah. Sleep, like the thing for me is when I notice like if my sleep habits go off, then my mental acuity
yeah.
will decline. Not just acuity, but then like my my ability to deal with stress just goes down the drain. My
Mm,
um everything starts going down the drain. So the number one thing for me is
mm,
consistent sleep habits, right?
mm,
Um when I start feeling myself, there's this sense of like boredom. Like what's going on? Why am I bored? Like
that's the
when I start
ADHD coming out. You need to do
right.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. So like how can I scratch that itch in a healthy manner?
Mm.
Right. Because there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways. Like boredom is, and it's not necessarily bad. Sometimes you should just sit in your boredom and be okay with it. Like it's
Yeah.
okay being bored, right? Scratching that itch is sometimes bad. So for me, it's regular check-ins with my therapist. Rochelle and I have been seeing a couples therapist, and then making sure that I'm regularly physically active, doing something that
Mm.
I enjoy, right?
Getting
So
the
for
light
me, yeah,
outside.
yeah. So for me, like hockey sticks back there, I play hockey. I love hockey so much. Like if I could play hockey every single day of the week, I would.
Mm.
Um, so I got hockey tonight, and throughout other than that, like we go on regular walks and play with the kids. And like
Mm.
I'm not gonna like I have aspirations to go to the gym and whatnot, but I just think
Well,
that
look,
like
you're doing something, right? You're out
right,
hockey, what, how many times? 3, 4 times a week.
yeah,
You're out in the taking walks. You're out in nature. You're sleeping. You got your sleep hygiene in place to regulate that.
yeah,
So, because what I think people don't understand is that fixing the outside doesn't fix a broken inside. You've got to do both sides of the coin of the work, you know. So you
and
often see guys on, Instagram where they're in the gym, go dark, go in the gym. And I'm like, yeah, but he's got CPTSD. He does a gym 1 hour a day. The rest of the time, his mind's bent out of shape
right.
because someone says, you don't need therapy, do my course, do this. Do you know what I mean? And so what he really needs is to dig deep into his childhood, work out and rejoin those dots because you can only live for 1 hour a day. But they set it like this tone is, yeah, all you need is the gym, get your food in, get your protein in, and da da da. And it's bollocks because
It's
you need
okay.
to
Like
nourish
it's okay.
everything.
Yeah, I just call them mind doctors, right?
Mm,
When you're sick, you go to the body doctor, right?
mm,
If you break a leg, yeah. If you break a leg, you can go. You're gonna go get a cast and get it fixed, right?
yeah.
If you, wife's taking the kids to school. This is my puppy. Um, you know,
Mm,
you you break a leg, you go to the doctor, you get a cast, right? If there's something wrong with your brain, there are professionals that are trained, right?
mm,
And now I know that there are a lot of people that have different stigmas on different types of therapists and whatnot. And the great thing about the world that we live in is you can see someone that aligns with your core beliefs.
mm,
Crazy. And they're also trained psychiatrists and or psychologists, right? Like the world that we live in now, like I'm using an app called Talkiatry. And like I could look through, okay, this person specializes in this, and you can see the schools that they went to. So
mm,
I found a guy that uh, seemed to align more with like my core beliefs, and like it's fantastic. And he is a trained psychiatrist, like
mm,
doctor. He's a brain doctor, and that's what I tell my kids. Like I just call them brain doctors. Like my brain is a little broken, and it's okay,
mm,
right? Like it's okay to have to admit that you need help. And so I think your physical regimen, whatever, your nutrition, making sure that you're eating good food, making sure that you're working out. Like for me, like you said, sunlight, getting out in the sun. Like if you can't
mm.
get that, and supplementing like vitamin D and
D3, yeah.
D3, K2, that stuff like is huge in the winter.
Mm,
Um, and then talking to a therapist. Like that should be a part. I don't understand why it's just not a part of everybody's normal routine. Even when you feel okay. Like honestly. Because okay, well you feel okay. Well just have a short appointment next week or next
mm,
month. It doesn't need to be an hour. I'm feeling good.
mm,
But I think coming back to like I said this earlier, right? Like okay, well I did the thing, I'm okay. I did that once. I'm okay, right? I think that you need to just continually evaluate yourself and just be okay with being human and be
mm.
okay with like the fact that okay, yeah, you did it once, maybe you went through a bunch of shit and that was also very traumatic and it's okay.
Yeah.
Because like there's people oftentimes will look at some point of trauma and like, well, I'm not a war vet, so I don't have trauma. Well,
Mm,
everybody has points of trauma, right?
No one
And
comes out of childhood unscathed, whether
right,
they recognise the behaviours or not, because of it's developing the self awareness as well.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
you only
So
knew stuff was going on because you were using coping mechanisms, and it took
right,
others, like your partner, to tell
right,
you this is done. If you don't get yourself sorted out, I'm off. I'll put up, and that was enough to get you to be more self-aware because she watched the patterns. That's why I
right,
say I don't listen to words. I look at behaviours. Your wife obviously were looking at your behaviours and see every winter there was something going on, and she didn't want to go through that again each time. And there's cycles, right?
right,
So you end up going through these cycles, and she wants the cycles to stop. And the only way that
exactly.
stops is an intervention. And
Yep,
look what Tim said. He said, you're going to go into that cycle again. And if you don't
yep,
get sorted in the next 2 weeks, right, I'm making the call
yep,
and it's getting done.
yep.
That's the best gift someone could give you.
I completely agree. And so, like, for those males specifically, one of the reasons why I have this stupid mustache, if people are just listening, I have a ridiculous mustache. I shaved this in November because November is Men's Health Awareness Month, or the
Hmm.
Movember, right? And I think that it's very underlooked in our society that men's mental health specifically. So if you're a dude listening to this episode, like, and you feel like you might need a little help, you do.
Hmm.
Okay. Like if you're thinking, oh, I might need help, don't just think, just take the might out and say you do. And if you don't have good friends, like find healthy people to be around.
Hmm.
Like every man specifically needs friends. I have a friend who is a
You
therapist.
need a brotherhood.
You need a brotherhood. I have a friend who's a therapist that's a good buddy of mine. And he made a statement to me the other day about how many men don't have friends.
It's true. When they get married, see what women are brilliant at doing is they retain their friend groups.
Right,
Whether it's going for coffees or whatever they do, they get around and then they talk because talk therapy, from my understanding, was developed. It might have been Jung and Nietzsche hundreds or so years ago, when a lady turned around and said, "Can you stop talking? I'm still talking. Right, let me finish." And for ladies, it's good for them to talk things through. Right, it's like that talk therapy, whether they're conscious, non-conscious of it, it can help them feel better. It's the same when your partner speaks to you. As men, right, we're fixers. We use our logic, right? So the first thing you want to do is fix the problem. But what Rochelle might be wanting for you to do is just listen. She's not asking you to fix anything.
yeah,
She's waiting to be heard, right? So going back to the situation with guys, they don't tend to retain their relationships and they drift off, drift off, drift off. And then they become isolated. So then when there is a problem, they're not going to phone their friend they haven't spoke to for 3.5 years because they're embarrassed to speak to because they're not seeing them. So they don't want to share that with them. Hence, that we need to promote that more men, have healthy hobbies, have a brotherhood. I'm not talking about going down the pub and getting pissed 3 nights a week. I'm
right,
talking about having a brotherhood that you can share with, you can talk to, you have that camaraderie together as well. Maybe you do sports together, you
exactly.
know,
I,
and that
there's-
is healthy for extension of life.
I just want to encourage people with this episode to, like, if you feel like you need help, just go get help.
Mm,
Just look into it.
yeah,
Um, if you need friends, be a good friend. Right?
absolutely.
It takes it's a two-way street. If there's I can't, like, my buddy Blake, who's a therapist. Um, we're all busy,
Mm,
but it takes one person to send a text and say, "Hey, do you want to get coffee?"
mm.
Like, have that be you.
Just a message, just checking in. Doesn't have to
Just
mean
check in.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you?
Mm.
Yeah. So
So as we wrap, where do you feel that you are, the place you're in now? Like if we go back to August, you've come on leaps and bounds, you got your purpose back, you stick into your healthy regime from sleep to to the mind doctor or therapy, whatever you want to call it, that suits your needs to call it. It is what it is, but it's healthy. And you then become a credit to society and to your own family because you've taken accountability and responsibility for your own mental health. So going back to what you said earlier on is like, it's not your fault, right? But it is your job to heal. And that's hard for people to hear,
Right.
but it is your job to heal. And when you do, you're going to have better relationship with your family, your children, your community, but it comes back to the self. It comes back to the accountability that you hold for yourself, which in turn benefits others.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean,
I'm proud of you, mate.
Thanks, man. Thank you. I think that spot that I'm at now is I'm Paul. I don't have anything to prove.
Thank you.
Yeah. Love you, man.
If people, you too, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Shoot me an email. My email is paulb or paul at emailinflux.com.
Excellent. Guys, thank you for joining us today. I know it's pretty heavy going, but it's an important topic. I want you to make sure that you reach out to your loved ones and your friends around you because you don't know who's going through a struggle. Be that person that makes the call, and like what Tim did with Paul here. So take care of yourself and your family, and I'll see you again next